Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Automate Office Work podcast. My name is Justin, and today's episode is Cutting Slack with Kevin Keller. I do have a guest today. His name is Kevin Keller. Kevin, would you like to introduce yourself and give some of your background? How did you get to be on here today?
Yeah, sure. My name's Kevin Keller. I am currently general counsel at Forward Networks, so I am an attorney. How I got here, that's a big existential question, but I grew up in a small town, and I'm the first of my family to go to college, let alone grad school, and I sort of, in some ways, muddled myself into this. Growing up, I loved technology. I loved, when computers first came out and there were Apple IIes and stuff. We didn't have one at home, but in the computer lab, and my friends had a Commodore 64 that we program, and so I loved that. And when I was deciding what I was going to do as an education, or what I was going to do with my life, the only options in the small town I was from that were in front of me that I saw were you could go work as a farmer, which many of my family did. My family has a history of working in the sawmill as well. A grandfather, father, uncle, all in the sawmill. I worked there during summers. So that was an option. There was, go to the military. I think that's for people in the rural communities, and if you don't have people around you who go to college or whatever, that's seen as an option. And it really wasn't something I thought about until my friends started applying to colleges. And I was like, wait a second, I've done okay in these classes. I love science and all this. That's really an option. And I started the process of applying for schools. I sort of did it in a half measure, in a sense that I applied for military ROTC scholarships and all of that, did all the testing. I got some ROTC scholarships lined up. I didn't end up taking one, but yeah, I did an undergrad I started computer science, realized I really wanted to know how things worked even more. And so I went into electrical engineering because I wanted to know how computers worked down at the lowest levels. And then I found myself midway through college wondering what was next and not having a roadmap. I got married fairly early. My wife came home one day from school with a sample LSAT and said, whenever something about the law comes up, you have something to say about it. Maybe this is for you. and I know that sounds really silly, but that's what it took. I took a sample test because it's logic and analytical reasoning, which engineers are good at. I did really well on the sample test. I decided I will study for this. And I did some calculus that, I didn't assume I was going to do great in law school. I hadn't done great coming into engineering school, but I'd had a path of learning and growth that ended up, by the time I was a senior, getting really, really, really good grades. So I thought, well, maybe that's probably my pattern. So I'm not going to be the top student in law school. So if I'm going to go at all, I need to go somewhere where I can have a guarantee, or not guarantee, but a higher likelihood of overall financial success if I'm going to sink time, and especially the money that it takes to go to law school. And so I took the test with that in mind. If I got a high enough score I could get into top school, I would go, because those top schools metrics showed that this many students got jobs out of them and all this. And that was my calculus. And I did well. And so I went to law school. And I know that sounds really like, not a very well planned or thought through, thing. And I feel lucky that I've managed to, through put together a career that combined both those things I really liked: technology, supporting companies that are developing technology, and the law, the profession that I followed. So that's how I got where I am, and I've managed to make my way through. I worked at Wilson Sonsini for a total of 5 years, very well-known tech law firm, Microsoft, Amazon, Instacart, Meta. I've been general counsel a couple places, and along the way I had a chance to be in the room with some really fascinating people making fascinating technology. So it sort of combined the two things that I really liked. That's how I got where I am. No magic to it. When people, you look, and I look at people's LinkedIn's and their resumes, and I see this progression. I think, wow, how did they chart that? That's a really cleverly crafted career. They got these jobs right at the time when these companies were just hitting their stride. How did they do that? I think a lot of it is luck. I think a lot of it is cultivating connections, being in the right place at the right time, and a lot of it is luck. We don't necessarily chart these, and there's no sort of linear path in a lot of careers, and certainly not mine. So
Wow. So I'm hearing that you ultimately did make like an intersection of these two things, but at the time, that wasn't necessarily your plan.
well, and it didn't exist. I mean, think about, I was going to college in 1989. Um, you know, the internet did exist, and as an engineering student, I was someone who had access to early internet through Unix commands and all this non-graphical user interface and all that. So it did exist, but um, just the whole idea of like a tech lawyer or advising on technology companies. I mean, there were only a handful of them at the time, right? Apple, Microsoft, some big companies like IBM. And to get in those, especially the bigger ones, you had to have different credentials than I ever had. So it didn't exist at the time. But yeah, it's sort of evolved over the past 25, 30 years that there is a tech law, and advising on these technical matters that has evolved, and it's pretty cool. I mean, I feel lucky to have kind of been involved along the way. So.
Well, cool. Okay, so you studied computers, and deeper than that, you studied electrical engineering, like the base of like
Yeah,
what the electricity is actually doing and how we harness that to really create computing.
yeah.
Uh,
How transistors work, right? How you make actually a logic gate that is a one
mhm.
or a zero with transistors from I could take a box from Radio Shack and make a D flip flop, which is one of the fundamental kind of things down inside of the semiconductor chips that is a logic gate that gives you your one and zero. Yeah. Pretty cool stuff to like understand how, put electricity here and here, and this thing changes. Now you've changed the output of the gate, and that's the switch in the computer. And so it's pretty cool to get to understand all that stuff. And I think throughout my career, I've been lucky enough to still keep involved with technologists. But the thing about, even an undergrad education in electrical engineering, computer science, is it's dated by the time you graduate. It's, in fact, you're behind the state of the art by a long shot, unless you're master's, PhD, working on cutting edge research where you're actually ahead of the curve. Most of what you're learning in undergrad is just, the basics that have already been, that everyone knows, and nothing really new. So you don't start out as some whiz bang technologist. You start out with a kit. And for me, that kit was there, but I didn't really do a lot with it once I got to law school and on the technology side. And I think I didn't know how much I missed that part of my personality, that builder part of my personality, until I got maybe to Amazon. Well, maybe it was actually earlier when I was in my first role, when I was advising Napster in the early days. And I'd had all these ideas about how you could actually leverage the technology in different ways, and was, feeding them to the Napster team, who was like, yeah, this is a great idea, and so it sort of validated that my technical mind was still there and it had some value. And I don't think they ever developed a feature or functionality or anything based upon their attorney sending them an idea, but it gave me an outlet for like these creative ideas about technology that I still had. And when I got to Amazon, even more so, because they view everyone there as, as a whole person who contributes, whatever they have, including like, if you have ideas, there's no idea that all the patentable ideas and all the interesting projects and stuff have to come from the engineering team or from the product managers. Great ideas can come from anywhere within the organization, and they sort of encourage that. So that was, I was encouraged to like really think creatively on legal issues a lot of times. And some of the legal issues, there was a resolution that was a technical resolution that was, elegant and simple. And I would throw that out there, and they'd be like, well, let's patent that. That's a really great idea. That's as a feature and functionality. And so that scratched the itch further. And I think more recently, as technology has advanced to the place where it's a lot more approachable for everyone, it makes it more approachable for someone like myself with the technical background, but a very atrophied, technical muscle and very dated skills and very dated knowledge to get themselves back up to speed very quickly and start to actually build things and build the real things that have been in their brains for a long time. So that's kind of the evolution. And for me, the excitement over the past few years has been, these tools now that I can engage with that have gotten me back into the weeds of like actually being able to build things that are meaningful and fun and are stretching my mind, learning, all this new technology. So it's been quite a ride. But I think it's so approachable now that I don't even think it takes someone with my background to jump in and actually take your ideas and make them into something, which is just, it's an amazing time to be alive for that reason.
So tell me how you started doing this. Like, the name of this episode is Cutting Slack.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
apparently there's Slack somewhere in here.
Yeah, there certainly is. Like, so I started playing with things like Zapier and all this a while back, probably in 2021, 22 timeframe. I'd become a general counsel of a company called Super, now called Super.com, but they were Snap Commerce at the time. And you're the first person on the ground, and then you start to build out a team. And one of the things that the evolution of the legal practice in-house over the past maybe 10 years for me has been an increase in noise and noise from all different directions. I mean, before you had it's still, you had your inbox, your email inbox, and it's impossible and it's hard to track everything coming in. But then you add to that Slack, constant messaging, and then there was other instant messaging before, but it wasn't quite as embedded in the way people do business as much as Slack has managed in the past 5 to 10 years to like really be embedded and just be a constantly used tool. So you've got that noise. You've got people working collaboratively in documents that change all the time on you, and that people make comments and add comments to you and so you've got this constant stream of like, hey, did you see my message in Slack? Did you see this? When and an expectation of answers in this, and it was just a lot. And especially when it's a small team, a small just one person at a place, keeping track of it is just like crazy. So I started thinking about how in the world do I get my arms around this? I don't think it existed yet, but it was sort of in parallel with this. Companies like Legal S, which changed their name to Flank OS, great company, started and based out of Europe. They started developing kind of workplace automation, and at the same time, I was thinking about what signals can I get from this that I don't have to see everything, but I can consolidate signals. So the first thing I built, just played with, was building kind of a sentiment analysis tool for Slack, because one of the things that happens, I think, in organizations when they're limited legal resources can be that one, people in some ways see legal as unapproachable and a little bit frightening, right? I mean, I have to admit, like, if I hear I've gotten a letter from an attorney on the other side myself, even as an attorney, my radar, my anxiety goes up. So if I'm an attorney and I feel that way, then other people do. So a lot of people don't want to approach you. And so they'll make their own legal judgments and they'll share them with other people through the organization. And now this happens in Slack, right? Sometimes you give some advice, legal advice, and it's either taken too broadly or too narrowly. And it can be used as a cudgel in some ways. Well, legal said this to stop someone from doing something, but maybe I didn't say exactly that. I just said for a limited area, don't do this, right? It's got some challenges. So I wanted to get a sense of the sentiment across the company. And so I created, a Zapier integration that would analyze all of the general, the open channels, public channels, and any of the at mentions about me, or at legal, anything that legal or, me. And at the end of the day, just pile those together and do a sentiment analysis. So I took that in and I took, just basically generated a spreadsheet that at the end of the day, I could kind of look at where are all the mentions of legal and what do they say. And then I could go in at the end of the day just once and I could look at those and kind of correct any misconceptions, respond to things, all that. Decided to go one step further and then automate it so I could, um, because what also happens within legal, and this is the thing that Flank OS, and Streamline AI and others are doing now too, which is to how do you automate responses when you have very similar questions, right? So I was like, well, if I'm getting these questions, how can I automate a response, not have to type out a response to everything twice, 5 times, whatever the case is. So I automated, did a first pass. Somebody asked a question to Kevin. I built the Zapier tool out now where all those went into a queue. They all could be queued up and then answered by AI. A first pass looking at a RAG that was my documents, and then it would provide me in a private Slack channel with the proposed answer. And I set it up so that if I gave it a thumbs up, then it would just send it right back to the channel in which the question came. If I didn't do anything with it, then it just sat there and I could edit it and then I could send it. And so I started automating that way to but I hadn't built in any logic at that point to, for similarity. So every single question that came in, I'd have to look at the answer and then give it a thumbs up, thumbs down. And that was where I left it. I think I hadn't yet sort of played around with coding itself. And so I sort of just ended playing with Slack there. But this past year or so, and this is like as, Replit and some of these coding co-pilots and everything really kind of hit the zeitgeist, and everyone, they started getting really good. I mean, the reality is these things are really good. And if you haven't played with them, even as a non-technical person, if you haven't played with them and seen what they're actually capable of doing, I think you'd be very, very surprised. Around December timeframe of last year, there was a great creator on YouTube who created a video that showed him starting from scratch, from nothing. It's a UK-based creator, and he created a Tide Times app using Cursor with Xcode as his IDE, so you could see and simulate and see what was happening, and public API for data for Tide Times. And he did it all in one setting. It was literally like 15 minutes. And I thought, okay, if I'm ever gonna do this, like just dive back into looking at code and everything, let me try this and see. And it gave me this starting place, this kind of, toe hold, finger hold into it, where I could follow those exact instructions through, set my environment up. And I think that's the intimidating thing for people who haven't done this, is like, where do I even start? How do I set up an environment? Where is the code? What's going on? Like, and to have somebody walk you through in great detail so that you can, just follow bit by bit. And at the end of the day, have something very similar. That was also my first introduction to the variants, right? Because yes, he did exactly these steps and his app looked like this. I did exactly the same steps and my app looked slightly different because, non-deterministic, output from an AI code generator. So, and I ran into build errors that he didn't have, partly due to my environment setup. And so it was just enough to add friction. It was not enough friction to dissuade me from trying. And I think that was, I'm like, okay, I've got 5 build errors, okay, let me see if I can figure out what they are. I mean, look at them. Okay, now I can use the AI and the internet to say, what does this error mean? And how do I set it? And you just started ticking off, and I made a very, very simple app. I don't know if anyone has seen the movie Bad Santa with Billy Bob Thornton. He plays a mall Santa who uses his role to rob malls, in the holiday season. But he has, in deep in kind of a heart of gold, but he swears a lot. So I made an app right before the holidays called Bad Santa, where you could tell Bad Santa about a friend and their name, and generate a letter from Bad Santa for them that was very sweary, very funny, but very kind of also at its core, like saying good things and trying to encourage good behavior. Very simple, not a very complicated in terms of AI calls and everything. It was just an open AI chat completion call. But I had to figure out, what's my API key? What are the, it's not working now. Why is this not working? Can I look at the debug and see what's coming back from OpenAI? And between that and the errors in the API, the debug, figure out how to, and I got it working. And then I also dealt with Apple and the App Store, which is a journey to try to get an app through the App Store and understand their sandboxing and all these other rules. But yeah, that was my foray into it. And so more recently, back to the Slack, I said, well, can I do what I really set out to do initially and really fully automate this? And so I started looking into, how do I integrate with Slack, which is not easy. Unfortunately, you have to be part of the developer program and all that. And so it's a pretty heavy lift, and I didn't want to necessarily do that. So I found a workaround in my technical savvy, I guess it is, or at least I'm going to find a way that's easier. And so I created, and I wanted to do it in a way that, like, I think that my first foray into this is early in the AI world, and most of what I was sending, in fact, I think all of the things that I was sending to analysis back then wouldn't have been considered confidential, let alone privileged. But, thinking as an attorney, I'm like, well, how do you make this in a way that's like completely secure and completely private and completely, controlled for confidentiality and all that? And so I wanted to make something that ran locally on a laptop using local AI. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to build a app that basically can take in when a message pops up in Slack, it will then be sent to this app that's on your local machine, processed, analyzed, answer generated. If I like the answer, I can actually automate it. And then I want any similar questions to get answered the same way within a similarity confidence score. So that got me into, you're definitely looking at semantic search and comparing queries to see which ones are the same, and how do you then trigger an answer, how do you set a confidence score, how do you tune that over time. It's a lot of learning along the way, but it created basically an app that sets on your local desktop. And because of the Slack integration being really tough, I had to do a workaround, which is that I use a tunnel through my laptop, and I use some webhooks and Zapier and all that to then trigger the activities happening. But yeah, now I've gotten to the final kind of completion of that, and I put the code out actually on GitHub as open source code for anyone who wants to kind of play with it and kind of take it further. I think that if you had a commercial account, you could probably create this. I mean, if I were going to do it correctly, like as a product, a Slack assassin was the term I used for it, I would probably do a web-based, and I'd probably do it within an AWS Bedrock or a Google Cloud instance that you could guarantee, security and confidentiality. You could actually offer it to customers as an offering that had complete control of the data throughout. You could get SOC 2 compliance and all that with it. But I think at this point, I know how to do it. If I were going to build a commercial product, I would know exactly how to do it if I, were to but there are great parties already in that place. Like I said, Flank, and others, Streamline as well. So this was more about me wanting to complete that thing, that probably that little OCD piece of me that's okay, I started this. I have to finish the overall project before I can move on to the next thing mentally. So
the name Slack Assassin, is it trademarked?
It is not. It was not. I think that there was I wanted to use, and Apple wouldn't let me in the App Store because I was going to put it out that way. They would not let me use Slack Off. Or Slacker was the Slack Off and Slacker were names, but then Slack Assassin seemed to be okay with them, which I thought was kind of funny.
That sounds violent.
Yeah, I know.
If somebody wants to find your work on GitHub, how can they find it?
Yeah, we have a little side that's my scratch my itch with my little side startup called Takuchi, which is TUXUCI. Sorry, I just misspelled my own name. TUCUXI, Takuchi. Takuchi is a river dolphin, a species of river dolphin, and the name came from the concept, people always consider attorneys as sharks, and I always found that somewhat like, I didn't like the symbol of an attorney as a shark. And so when I got to Amazon, the general counsel, I love her to death, Michelle Wilson. She is a fantastic executive. Like, she's been on the boards of amazing companies, and if you could ever have her on a board, she would be like, she's amazing. But she had the mascot of the Amazon legal department, a shark, and love her, but I didn't love the mascot. So at Lab 126, we were the subsidiary, and I was the first attorney Amazon hired in the U.S. outside of Seattle to be the lead at that subsidiary. And we were sort of different in the sense, even as a company, as a subsidiary, because we were developing hardware, and Amazon had never done that. And so a lot of the ways they developed and a lot of the ways they thought about, development were very rooted in software and stuff. So we were already different. So I decided that we would have a separate kind of sub mascot, and we would be the dolphins, because dolphins are smart. They're friendly, they help people, but they're also not pushovers. I mean, orcas are pretty fierce, right? They're a species of dolphin. So I always liked the dolphin as a mascot for legal. And that's where the logo or the name Takuchi came from, and the logo which we have, which is a dolphin. Our website has got a lot of so long and thanks for all the fish sort of references. And the law school training app that I created, Uni U.S. Law School, which is about helping people study for their law school and bar exam tests, like less expensively. The imagery in that is all, dolphins and dolphin mascots that escort you through your learning journey and everything. So it's all about dolphins, I guess, for me. And I did get a chance to actually swim in the Amazon River with the river dolphins in the Amazon a few years back, and it was a very amazing experience. I would, if you manage to make your way to Peru, I think a lot of people hit Cusco, and it's gorgeous, like Cusco and the Machu Picchu and all that. You get this high elevation, but we went and did the second part of the trip, which is the border.
I think I want to pull you back.
Yeah,
technology.
Yeah, we can go back to technology. That's where the dolphin came from.
Yeah. All right. So I love hearing your story. I'm hearing that if you have a dream and you can dream it, there are tools, guys, and you need to be trying them out. Start with something simple. Start by copying somebody else and then tweaking it a little bit to meet your needs, but follow along like a tutorial and start simple, and then you expand from there.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same pattern that you use anywhere. I mean, if you think about what you do as an attorney or legal professional, we don't start from whole cloth, right? That was a misconception I think I had when I started, and somebody asked me, hey, you need to build a website development agreement. I think that was the first thing I got asked to build as a technology transaction attorney. I'd be like, I don't know. Where do I even start? And they're like, well, you go and get like 5 different examples of things, and if there's nothing exactly like it, you get like 5 things that look like they're in the ballpark, and then you just start to look through what are the things common through here, and now let's put them in a framework, and let me now build in and scaffold this agreement together. Very similar with coding. I mean, in fact, I hold that I think lawyers and people with that legal mindset about building legal agreements and thinking logically through problems are well suited for doing this. I mean, it's very, you architect, what you want to do, you lay out, an outline, you start to build the scaffolding, it's logic, if this, then that, else this. A lot of the way we think as legal professionals is the same way you think as a builder, and it's not at all seen as like a gap in you that you go and leverage all these things from other people. That's why GitHub exists. That's why you can grab a code snippet here or code snippet there. You can, it's not cheating to take someone else's work that they've open sourced and just build it and run it, and okay, now I can build it and run it. What if I tweak this one little thing? I want to change this thing, and that's how you start. Just do it, and it's so approachable these days. I would hold out, and I think I won't speak for you, Justin, but I know a lot of us in the community. I'm more than happy to walk somebody through a tutorial too and help them get started. And I've done some tutorials when I was at Legal Week, when we did the example of a citation checker, how to simply do that. There are open source resources out there that you can use to build your own citation checker to check for hallucinations. And I kind of want to walk people through the process of using a vibe coding tool like Cursor and building one for yourself. And so I did it like in a few nights and videoed and everything. So there's resources like that out there that you can tap into. And I would absolutely encourage people to be playing with this technology, because it is very approachable. And there will be a time at which those who've approached it and who got these skills are way ahead of the curve compared to other professionals because of it.
I was even thinking about your example of a tool that takes in a question and is able to take a first pass at answering it. And my thought was that if I was to approach this, I would start categorizing the different types of questions, because there's only like 3 types of questions people ask. There's the questions like, hey, how are you? That's more like a greeting kind of a thing. Like, this isn't really something that needs to go into your queue to answer. It's fluff. It's basically nothing. Then there's general questions. They're like, hey, how do I get a contract? And then this kind of answer, it's going to be the exact same every single time. And I think that this is where AI really excels. It's able to look at your policies, your procedures, your things that never ever change. And I think when I met with Flank, they also said that this is where they excel. It's the answer that never changes.
Yes.
So there's that type of question. And then there's the questions where the answer is it's very personal. When they're asking, where is my contract? Now, that's not just an answer that I can look up in a procedural kind of a thing.
Yeah.
This is something that it's going to have to go look up in a database. And when they ask this type of a question, you better have their different contract requests in a database that it can say, hey, I see you've got 5 contracts in the database. Which one are you asking about?
Yeah, it drives you to think about, how am I categorizing, my data? Because as you start to categorize it like you did, you get to that last bucket and you're like, well, to be able to get this one right, I need to actually have data structured somewhere. And maybe that means I need to have a CLM tool, or I need to have at least some mechanism for categorizing this, whether it's a spreadsheet. So then, maybe that's where you start. You now got a spreadsheet tracking, agreements that you can tap into with your product to see what the status is and pull it. You're like, that's not very elegant. That doesn't work very well. It's brittle. So now let me build in a back-end tool that collects and organizes this data in a way that I can tap into it and answer these questions. But it's very. This
is what I was going to ask next.
Yeah.
What if people are starting a project like this and they don't have a spreadsheet of information to point the AI at? They just want to point the AI at, like, I don't know, their emails, which are very unstructured. Yeah. And I'm guessing that you're going to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're going to say that's not a very robust way of getting data to answer this question. You're going to get hallucinations at best.
Yeah, and so I think, but then you just start to iterate, because you're like, well, I've got the data, it's not structured, I can use AI, but my hit rate is pretty low, right? So I'm going to have a human in the loop. I'm going to have checks and everything in here because my data's not clean, and because of that, my AI is kind of iffy. It's not going to be as deterministic as I want it to be, at least within a band. So I'm going to have to, my next step will be to structure this data in some way, or figure out a way to use AI, use some other tool to figure out how to structure it. But it can be as simple as, we're thinking about how to implement legal tech, within our company, and I think other people do as well. But you don't do it in one big massive project. A lot of times you do it in, like, where can I start to clean up my data? Where can I, maybe I can start out with, the sales team. Just, we don't have, you probably do have Salesforce, but assume you don't even have that. Like, how do you start? Well, you're like, well, let's have a Google form that they fill out, and it drops it into a spreadsheet. So I at least have a spreadsheet of the ongoing contracts. It's not automated in any way. It's not there's no automation of the updates and all this, but that's probably a start. It's better than just having to randomly query everybody through email and how many contracts are there out there, right? That's very inefficient. So you start to just think about, how can I consolidate the data? How can I track the data that I need to make these decisions and make these products work? But if it can be daunting, if you have to think that everything has to be perfect and your data sources have to be perfectly organized and everything to start. You can get started. It's gonna, not be as robust as where you want to end up ultimately. So,
Mm. Would it be a good idea for people as they're going down this path for them to become more educated and literate about data and data structure? Like, what does it mean for data to be organized, even?
yeah, I think absolutely. I think that understanding, when people say I want a JSON, a schema or what, they're like, what do they mean, right? What's the engineer saying there? Really, how do people structure data? How do databases work? Um, as you're building, you learn really quickly. Like, you've got to anticipate that.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Right. And you've got to anticipate that, like, you may find out midway through, actually, I needed more data fields than I calculated. And I've done this in a way that now I'm going to, my database is half baked, and to add a new field is going to mess it up. And, because I didn't architect it to allow for flexibility in the data fields and all this. So,
Yeah.
um,
Like you do a flat list of things when
right.
actually you need like more dimensions to it.
Exactly. And I think the more you get to know this stuff too, either because you're working with an engineering team and you ask them to do something like, oh man, it's going to refactor the database, and you're like, what does that mean? And what does that mean in terms of time and effort to you? You get some of that tangentially as you're advising technology companies that are building things. But when you start building yourself, it really starts to matter. And when you start, I would say when you start down this road of building some technology yourself, vibe coding, whatever, you learn quickly too that, like, taking a step back and thinking about architecture and thinking about the data is very, very helpful. Because if you get down the road and then you decide to make a last minute change on something and you pull a thread, but it's the whole code has been very very put together like a spaghetti structure. You pull that one piece and it's all going to collapse. So
I compare it to trying to rebuild an airplane when you're already in flight.
right, that's exactly
You're
what
going to have problems.
yeah. So if you, at least at the beginning, like, okay, the aircraft has to have, two fixed wings, this and this, and that structure has to be there. I can't get into the air, like launched off a cliff, and realize, wait, I need two wings, I only have one. How do I build a wing without opening the fuselage and letting the people out, right? So there's a little bit of that, but it's start with a small project. The stakes are low that way. When you pull a thread and it falls apart, you will be like, oh, and you'll learn a lesson. I think you can't take all the friction out of these things 100%. And I think when you completely take all the friction out, you don't learn anything and along the way. And I think that can be a danger of, like, just a magical, one shot vibe coding and I got this out. Well, okay, that's great.
This is what's being marketed to everybody.
Right.
It's like, oh, you don't know anything about computers? Here you go. And then you suddenly realize, like, there's actually a lot more behind coding than just the code.
Yeah.
You have to think through, like, architecture, security. You have to think through, like, change management, like,
all of that.
Are we going to be evolving in the future? You have to be thinking several steps ahead.
Every time I come along and say, this happened last night. This is just an example. I've got this little app we call Whittle Pupper, and it's kind of an exploration of a mind and how different agents can work in different ways to deliver results. And it's the mind of a dog. And so you can talk with your dog. And if you are been feeding it, petting it, being nice to it, and all the stats are above 50%, the translation collar works and it'll translate back to you. And so it's very cute. It's built to be very cute in terms of its response to everything, but there is a chat feature. And as somebody who cares about, safety and AI and everything, and especially like kids, I want to make sure that we've got safety feature built in. And I've done a lot in terms of the prompting and everything to catch when someone, said, like, I'm not feeling great, I may want to end my life or something like that. And I want to make sure we're doing the right thing. And there's some laws kind of in play as to what you need to do when someone perceives it to be a human on the other side. This is a puppy, right? But still, this thing could, have a conversation with someone that could lead to some dangerous situations. So how do you build in safeties? Well, I hadn't built it in a very, very robust, like, here, you cannot go further without getting this message, sort of thing. And so I was like, I'm going to build this. And last night I said, I'm going to build this. And I was like, I think I've architected and I think I've structured this in a way that I can layer this in, no problem. But I still was a little bit nervous. I mean, this is one of the projects I've had done more recently, so it is architected pretty well. And sure enough, it was very modular. I had built so modular that, yeah, we were just able to slap this in as a safety module and get it working. I was able to do that last night in an hour, and get a safety system built into it that's as far more robust than what I'd had before. But there's always that danger, if you've just one shot coded something, you're going to come along and say, now I want to add a safety feature. And it's going to be like, where do I embed this? How do I get it working? There's so many like random ways in which data flows through this thing that you pull one and it messes up. So you can't right now just one shot and then say, but I also wanted to do this sophisticated thing and then have it just one shot and fix everything and make it all work. You're going to run into problems. But it is pretty magical that you can, get some result out after just like a few prompts to something and have a working piece of code that's running in a web, application somewhere. It's pretty magical, and it helps people get started and see the power and potential. And from there, yeah, you can run into one small problem and then solve that problem. And then you've got this now learning. And the next time you're not going to run into that same problem. And maybe you'll architect a little bit differently. But like anything, you're going to have to like go through a little bit of friction, a little bit of pain to learn and to get yourself to a place where, you're building robust things. But again, do you even need to? Being able to proof of concept, make an MVP, or just a tool that works internally for your teams, that's pretty powerful by itself. And as attorneys, you're also thinking, I can make an internal tool, but if I do it in the right place, if I'm doing it with the right data, it can be completely safe. It's not going to send data to a third party. So you can play with this stuff in safe ways and build your own legal tech, essentially. Now, again, you and I are both technical, so sometimes I'm like, oh, this is easy, and I have to pull back and say, is it really? And I will say, yeah,
we have a bias.
Yeah, I have a bias, but I do think, like, I've sat down and seen people who have never done any of this, and then hours later they've made something, and they're excited, and then they're on to making the next thing and the next thing, and they don't have the same technical background I have. But the thing is, I've told people for years this, and it's true. I thought when I came out of law school that having that technical background would be my super advantage. But then I went into this practice, technology transactions with Wilson Sonsini, and about half the people had one and half didn't. And there wasn't a line between like those who didn't have a technical background weren't as good and those who did were. Really, the factor in who was really great as a tech attorney was how curious they were, how much they wanted to know about the products and services that they were writing contracts and stuff for, that they got into the weeds and they really understood how they worked and they got those agreements right. And so it was more about learning, curiosity and learning. And you can have a technical background and not be a curious person. And that you're not going to be better at this than somebody who is a non-technical person, but highly curious and wants to understand when they get into an error. They're going to go read an API document, and it's not going to be undecipherable to them because they've deciphered statutes and regulations. I mean, legal things where people are actually purposely throwing words in to have different meanings, to have subtle things happen in regulation. And so there's actually, like, it's harder to read those things because there are traps and things set in the words, whereas in code, there's no like deception of, if means if, right? And so you're reading harder things. So I've found people who are curious and really into technology, but don't have a technical background, but have this skeptical, very good reading skill, can learn really quickly in this space. So you have a great set of tools as a legal professional to be a great, architect of code.
you got really close to an Einstein quote that I always say. It's imagination is more important than knowledge.
Yeah.
That's from Einstein. Einstein even said it, guys.
Yeah.
So if you are curious, it doesn't matter what the knowledge is that you need. If you're able to ask the right question, we now have the tools. You can go get the knowledge.
That's just the very thing, right? I think a lot of times we hesitate to learn things because we don't want to ask humans questions and seem like we don't know a lot, right? There's a lot of like personal fear about perception of ineptitude or whatever, and that's gone. I mean, we sort of eliminated some of that when we all got Google, right? And I use Google. I've used Google a lot throughout my career. It's a great starting place to, like, cast the net wide, get a bunch of resources, read a lot, and get myself speed. Now you have like this AI you can ask directly, like, I don't understand this. Can you explain it to me? As if, I mean, a lot of times I sort of play the like role of, like, when I'm asking for documentation from my AI, I'm like, write the instructions for how to do this for someone who doesn't know anything about computers and would not, we would need to be step by step through it. And that sounds like I'm writing down, but I'm actually telling it to write what I need. So I'm like, I'm playing like I'm I understand this, of course, but please, could you put it in terms for someone not as intelligent as me? Really, that I'm asking it for myself because I want it to walk me through every single step, so I'm not missing something in the setup. I need to set up this environment with these Python things, and I don't npm what's the right command line code. I don't know, but I'm going to act like I do to the AI, and the AI is going to answer as if, oh yes, we're collaborating together for these people who need to know this really simple stuff. But you can do that, and so there's no shame in that. There's no, like, no one's sitting there over your shoulder saying, well, you're not as smart as all the other programmers because you had to ask the AI. No one cares. No one knows. And so use it. You can use it to, like, give you the answers that maybe you felt like it was a stupid question, but everyone's going to ask it. And a lot of people have. That's why it's in the AI. It's been trained on all the answers to these questions on Reddit and places like that. And they're there for you. So all these resources are just at your fingertips, which is amazing.
So what kind of advice would you give to a person who doesn't have a technical background? They've become an expert in their field, and now they want to pivot to this. Would you tell them, like, go code, go learn? Or would you tell them maybe find a team, like you have an IT department? If you
Yeah.
can describe it to them, they can build it as well. Or would it be a
Yeah.
mix? Or am I totally
I
off?
think a mix. The interesting thing about I've been going to hackathons and things like that for years and observing them too, the ones that I don't go to. And it was the case maybe 5 years ago that if an attorney showed up at a hackathon or a legal professional showed up at a hackathon, they would be trying to chase down engineers to try to, find someone to help them with a project, that project idea. Now that the script is flipped. I think a lot of people see legal tech as a green field. And so I've been to the more recent Stanford hackathons, and engineers are chasing, to find domain experts to build products around, to understand the problems and understand it. So I would say if you're a domain expert, one of the most valuable things you have is your knowledge about the process, the thought processes, and everything that you do to come to a great legal answer. What are the sources of information, all this? So when you think about that, that's really the architecture of a product, like a really powerful product that can actually automate some of the things that you do by way, just matter of course, that aren't written down anywhere, right? A lot of this stuff, you can't train an AI on this stuff because it's in someone's head. It's at the edge of the network. And so what's most valuable is that accumulated practical experience and how to approach problem solving. So I find myself yesterday actually building out an assistant in OpenAI's Assistance Playground to help me extract from myself what is the problem, the approach that I take in solving these technology transactions / product counseling problems. Can I extract by doing a bunch of these and talking out loud in a sense about it, like writing back to the AI, answering its questions and everything? Can I extract from that general principles about an approach to this type of problem that then I can create a product around, that I can then automate in some way. But getting that information out of your head, that's the super valuable thing to start with, is just realize that like a lot of that domain experience, the way you do things and the way to do them most efficiently, it's not written down anywhere. So see about writing that down and thinking about what your process is. And then from there, you can find either yourself, one-shot code and see if you can create something, but you will be able to find resources, people to help you, build something at this point pretty easily.
I'm hearing the process is more important than the technology.
Yeah,
You get your process down.
absolutely. It's the most valuable piece. I mean, the technology is repeatable. The process is the value, and I think that's in some ways why some of these frontier companies are starting to like now employ legal and other experts. XAI just announced they're bringing out a bunch of very specific experts in different categories to like basically work through problems. They want to extract the process. The value is really in like the things that are inside the human minds that have been spending 15, 20 years or whatever the case doing these particular roles and understanding all the nuances, all the things that they take into consideration. I think that's the next frontier kind of training, but it's also where a lot of the value is. So there's a race, I think, to get to that. There's the tools that you and I can create ourselves and keep this information and this knowledge that we built up, build a tool around it and have our own tool. And maybe people get to that point where they can build their own tools and they have that knowledge and it's not kind of generally available. So it still remains valuable. I think, again, there's going to be a rush to like capture as much as that by these big companies so they can then monetize it. So yeah, the most valuable asset is kind of your process, I think.
So if I was to be like an innovation manager at a company, a department, a team, I've been hearing that a lot of them are just trying to buy the AI technology. And then there's an MIT report that like 95% of these are failing.
Yeah.
Sounds like the right approach would actually be to go map out the processes, find out what it is that people do already.
Yeah, there's a knee jerk right now. We got to do something, right? We got to do something. It's the feeling in the air is very much like it felt in the beginnings of the internet days. As I was coming out of law school, everything was cyber, and everyone was a cyber attorney, and everyone had to be doing cyber. And at the end of the day, like, yeah, we're 25, 30 years later. Yeah, the technology is just embedded in a lot of things, and we all use the internet, and all this is very ubiquitous, but it didn't happen overnight. It wasn't like everyone just crammed cyber, into everything. And it happened gradually over time. And I think the same is true of AI. And the right place to start isn't to try to throw every single AI at your company and hope it works. Because, you get like other technology things where you introduce it and, there's a big management push for it and 5 people use it at a company of 5,000 people. Right. And it doesn't get maintained and it doesn't get, and it, it's false knowledge tool. I think that there's some of that happening. There was a rush to like, just say you're doing something AI, and you see it too in AI policies that people create that they don't understand AI, but they have to have a policy. And so they create an AI policy. Same is true of tools. So I think, yeah, the first step, if you're really thinking about how to streamline and operationalize things within your company, is getting your arms around the process and what is it we do and document it and everything. And then you can think about which automation tool really makes sense. And I think, AI really is about like it's automation at its core. What am I automating? And so you have to think about it as another automation tool. It's a powerful, piece of technology that can use to help automate things that we previously couldn't automate as well. But that's what it is. And so you just, for AI's sake, is not really smart. Look at your processes and look at what you're doing, and then where can we automate it using AI now that we couldn't with other things.
I think we can connect two things that we've just been saying right now. You said we need to automate the right things, like we need to automate processes. And I think to connect the dots for our viewers, then, what is it that we automate? we automate processes. We don't automate entire jobs, entire people. At its core, people are doing these tiny chunks of things that are processes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you
And
have
there's,
to identify those.
yeah. And, you could automate every single process, every single repetitive thing people do. And, then you think, well, what are they there for? Well, I mean, people make connections and things that the machines still don't, right? And people, have then more time for strategy. It's my contention. I think we all have within any day a limited amount of, not necessarily bandwidth. Bandwidth sounds like time, but it's really like, how much mental engagement can I do within a given day? How much power can I exert? And if it gets tapped into constantly by these repetitive things that can be automated, that are processed, that are like answer the same question 5 times, you take that noise out, and more of that can be used for strategic work. So I do think
there's also an autopilot mode in your brain. Like when you get in the car, you're driving to work, you're basically in autopilot mode. And then when there's something out of the ordinary, like a slight detour or a car crash or something, then your brain flips. Now it's actively engaged, and you do have a limited amount of that. So yeah, we do want to make a lot of stuff become repeatable, dull, boring, so that your brain can just go through it.
Yeah.
And ultimately, we want to offload that to computers.
Yeah, and using your metaphor, if you were to go on an extra super long ride, even that automation, even that autopilot, you reach a point where your brain is not as capable of catching those unusual things. And that's when accidents happen on the road, right? Because people have used all their cognitive, bandwidth, if you will, over this long period of time doing this thing that doesn't take a lot of cognitive effort, but because they've just expelled it over this long period of time, they don't have that extra oomph for that deer that jumped out in the road at that point. And as somebody, you grew up in Montana, I grew up in Idaho, so the deer reference sort of made sense there. That's a regular occurrence.
For everybody who doesn't know, you can die when you hit a deer with a car. It's very serious.
Yeah, I mean, especially in Montana and Idaho, if you hit an elk or a moose, then all bets are off. They're big.
Ooh. All right. So, what are you working on next? What are your dreams of, like, what are you exploring still? What are you curious about?
Yeah. I got asked this question the other day, and it was in like, what's your passion, right? And they're sort of one kind of core area, I think, and that is, I've really been fascinated with like how we learn, and in particular, how we start out with no kind of specialized skills, and we learn like this specialized area and become very much an expert in it. A combination of mentoring and just the friction of learning and everything. So a lot of the things that I've been focusing on are, how do I convey information? So knowledge, that's like the law school application that I've created is really about conveying knowledge to people. But really, how do you break down the processes, and how do you like convey an actual like whole skill set? Like, take somebody and mentor them through use of technology and mentoring with a person, and make them the next generation expert, right? So a lot of the things that I'm exploring are about cognitive neuroscience and how we learn, and trying to find like this sweet spot between the friction that's necessary to learn a new thing, but also automating the things and teaching the process and an approach to problem solving that is transferable. So I'm building a lot of things in the back end, and it sounds very heady, really thinking about long memory context and mapping out mental processes, kind of in a graph, if you will. There's graph memory, but this is like graphing not just knowledge, but graphing like thought pattern and all that. So that's my deep technology exploration stuff. But in the meantime, like, I'm on the side, creating these apps. And one of the things I learned about myself through this is, there was this piece of me, this itch that I've been scratching a little bit along the way of learning technology and being involved with technology teams, advising them, and at a place like Amazon, being able to actually contribute here or there to the technology. I've got like 19 patents to my name as a result of the time there, that I really missed building. I really miss taking the ideas and making them end up, as a real thing in the world. And so, most of my playing is about like getting to do that thing that I really was a core part of my personality that I was really missing. So I think I'm just going to continue to explore um, myself and follow kind of paths, and most of them are directed at how do we help people learn um, more quickly and learn a particular skill set. Um, and yeah, if I can achieve that, like how can you maximize your ability to help other people learn your area of expertise? Then I think that would be a good thing to kind of capstone all the things I've done in my life with.
Oh,
So
cool.
yeah.
And do you have a parting message as we close?
Yeah, party messages. This is very approachable. I think if you love legal technology, if you love the legal profession, if you have a skill and you develop process and everything around this, it is not a heavy lift for you to create a tool, to create something that automates some process. And there are lots of resources like Justin and myself out there who are happy to help get you started. But it is not as daunting. It's not intimidating at all. Um, it feels that way, but with a little bit of help, you can get there. And I think there are a lot of you who might find what I found, that, gosh, I really like that thing that I'm doing. That really gets me up in the morning to think about that experiment I'm going to do tonight after I get home from work, with this particular code base, right? I mean, I sound really wonky saying that, but you may find yourself feeling that way. Like, I've got these experiments I'm playing with at home, and now all of a sudden your life, you've got this thing that you're really excited about. It's somewhat related to your day job, but it's play. So go out and play. I mean, I think we as adults, we don't play enough. I've been watching Alien Earth. I don't know if other folks are watching that. One of the actresses who plays a character called Wendy is a child in an adult robot body. And the actress, when asked like what she took to develop that, she said, I looked at what a child is. They're curious and instinctual and honest, and get out there and play. Get out there and remember, come in touch with your inner child and play with some stuff. Yeah, that's what that's my parting advice. Go play.
I think some of the people in the audience that are in the more cautious, the conservative professions like lawyers, uh, they're kind of told not to play. You're not allowed to make mistakes in your profession, and in this place, it's okay to make mistakes.
It's okay. And if you want a safe way to even make those mistakes, there's local AI, and one of us could walk you through a very easy way to, like, set it up on your computer so that nothing that you say, nothing that you send goes anywhere except for on your computer. And then you can play to your heart's content, and start creating stuff, and in a completely safe way. So it is safe to play.
Well, thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you
Yeah.
for coming on and spending the time with me and having this conversation. I hope it's beneficial to everyone and to everyone in the audience. I wish you happy automating.